welcome back. This is our last episode. Today we're going to be talking about the G and the E in our BRIDGE acronym, gatherings and expectations. Let's start with gatherings. So there's going to be a number of gatherings that we're going to meet that you specifically will have to be mindful of within the schedule and make sure that you're arriving to the allocated location at the right time. The first worship gathering that we're going to be talking about is the pre-worship gathering. This is going to happen right before each worship service. You're going to gather inside the worship hall with your small group to circle around, to encourage them, to get them ready for worship, and to pray with them. This is really important for the counselors and for the campers as well. For the counselors, it's really important for you to have that right heart right as you enter in, to have that mindset of worship and to pray loudly and to pray enthusiastically, to you yourself to have that tone of voice of like eagerness to worship, to kind of set that tone. It's really going to fill that room with the atmosphere of worship that the Holy Spirit, wants to move freely in. For the kids, they're going to be walking in from outside. They might have just, told a fart joke with their friends. They might have just ran around outside and they're like super sweaty and they're thinking about something completely different. But then they're entering into that worship service, and because of you and your prayers and because your eagerness to worship, because of your desire to be in that place at that time, they're automatically going to snap into worship mode. So it's really important for counselors to kind of set that tone during this pre-worship gathering. What do you guys think about things that they should include during this pre-worship time? They're going to be circling around with their friends, with their small group. What are some things that they should say, things that they should include? What kinds of tips would you have for a counselor who's new to this and maybe hasn't led a pre-worship gathering before? Like, what kinds of things do you think that they should include in this time?
The beauty about this pre-worship gathering is the fact that you, in this gathering, it's just you and your small group. And the thing is, every small group is going to be different. Their atmosphere, the things that they're struggling with, they're going to be different from each other's small groups. So I think definitely this time for them to prepare themselves, it's going to be a very intimate time because, maybe they could include like, is there anything you're struggling with or anything you're battling with? Then they can pray for that as they prepare themselves to go to worship. And then it's going to be very encouraging to know that they have interceded for their brother or they interceded for their sister. So this time is also for them to kind of follow up with each other before the worship starts and making it much more of an intimate setting for them.
That's so true. I didn't think about that because you really know your own small group best. So if you have more of a quiet group who's not as talkative, then your prayer is going to be more toward God. Bring passion out of us. Not a fire within us. Help us to worship you freely and loudly and with hands raised. Get us out of our shells and our comfort zones. And that's going to be your prayer. But if you have a group that's a little bit more rowdy, your prayer is going to be like, let's chase out all those distractions. We just want to focus on you. So you get to fine tune, the message that you want your kids to hear before they step into that worship service. So that's really awesome.
I think something that I would recommend, if possible, is if we have the passages before, to have the students to just kind of read through and to be ready, to kind of have a warm up to what the text has to say. Yeah. If we don't have that, that's okay too. But if there's any possibility of even incorporating scripture into the small group, maybe something even for you as throughout the day, you realize this passage came to mind and I just wanted to share it with you, so that right away they're gearing their minds towards God. Because as you were just saying, these campers are going to be coming back from dinner or just activities, and their mind is going to be scattered. Everywhere, and I've seen worship gatherings without this pre-worship where the kids are just running in and then they're lying down on the chairs, or they're like chasing each other in the room. And to see that, it affects all of us. Yeah. But to have each group being able to have focus and be attentive and be ready to worship, that vibe I think is very it just influences everything
Yeah.
when it comes to the worship time.
Yeah.
But-
You know, sometimes we get really lucky and we get a guest speaker who has all of his, like, you know, scripture references and even the message title all planned out, and it'll be in the booklet for you. So all you have to do is just kind of like flip to the next page and kind of like read ahead of what that is so that you could go over that with your students. But let's say you don't have that, you could also include whatever QT time that you had, whatever the worship service before that. Remember the last worship service? You know, this is what we talked about. This is what we had in our small group. Like, let's remember that as we're going into this worship and just you know, be ready for whatever else comes next. So yeah, that's a great way of using this time to kind of like tie in different elements of the retreat so that there's that continual just like flow and to get that back into that experience. Yeah, great. But if you are sitting at home and you're watching this video and saying, oh my gosh, I don't know how to give this like pre-worship pep talk, don't worry, because we have brand new something called a pre-worship pep talk that I am very affectionately and lovingly calling pre-pre. So it's the pre-pre worship gathering. So just in case you're not accustomed to kind of like praying out loud and giving this like pep talk to kids, maybe you don't talk to kids really on a regular basis and you're like, I don't know how to talk to them and say anything. Don't worry. I'm going to meet with you and I'm going to give you a pep talk and, you know, rev you up so that you feel like spiritually, man, yeah, I'm on fire so I can lead this pep talk. And if you're even really just like super nervous about it, you can even just copy whatever I'm saying, like, and pretend like you came up with it. It'll make you look really good and like really prepared and super smart. All you have to do is just listen to what I say and then just repeat that as you go into your small group worship service, because that pre-pre is really gonna, as a group of counselors, we're going to meet before the pre-worship service. It'll probably be after a meal or during some kind of transition time. We'll just take 5-10 minutes right outside the worship hall as the staffers are getting the kids into the room. You know, we're just gonna circle up and pray. And I'm gonna you know, prep you. I'm gonna give you that pep talk so that you feel energized to then give that same pep talk to your kids. And I think for the kids walking into worship, you know, I think that'll be a really just visual of like, oh, you know, here's my counselors and here they are, just like tears streaming, sweat pouring, just like, you know, spit flying, just like praying for my worship service that I'm walking into. How I dare any counselor, I mean, I'll dare any camper to walk into that worship service and then fool around after walking past that crowd.
Yeah. I think that this pre-pre idea is so great, because I think even the counselors, as the retreat progresses, I think there's going to be some fatigue and also moments of just feeling incapable. And you know, after like a couple of the small groups, if they don't go well, they're going to probably really doubt themselves and wonder like, am I ever going to break through? You know, am I ever going to actually do what I'm trying to learn here to do? And I think that having you know, speak to them and for them to also see each other together before they go into the worship and small group, I think will play a big role. And that's what I'm hoping for, that this will be a strengthening time, an encouraging time, and a time to also for them to realize what they're called to do. And I think this is great. I mean, I'm all for this.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, as you're describing what this pre-pre is about, like, I just thought of like, you know, like a basketball game. It's like the first half, and it's like halftime. You know, halftime is a time where the coach just, you know, starts like prepping the teams before they go back in, especially if their first half is like very discouraging, you know, they're doing so well. But then the second half, they're all pumped up to get ready to, you know, just finish the game well. So like pre-pre is kind of like a halftime where before they go back into the game, before they go back into the battle, you know, before they go back into what they need to do, you know, it's their time where they spend time with their coach, they spend time with their, you know, you're the coach, you know, you're the caregiver. It's for them to remind them, like, you know, that, you know, even if it's discouraging or even if it's hard, you know, God's gonna use you to remind them, like, you know, we're all in this together, and we're all parts. We're all part of this team, God's team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about pre-pre. So another aspect of your gatherings that you're going to be doing, so you're going to meet with me for pre-pre outside, then we're going to go inside and do pre-worship within our small groups. And then after worship is over, you're going to have your post-worship gathering with your small group. And that's the time where you're going to be leading your campers in the ICC. We talked about ICC in a previous episode, but I just want to talk about like exactly how this will be happening. So you're going to be given a space. We don't have spaces allocated, so you just kind of have to get with your group and figure out a good place for you guys to meet. I would probably do that a little bit beforehand, like, you know, if you finish dinner a little early and you want to scope out the place and kind of like designate your, because otherwise you'll be wandering around with your group trying to figure out where you're going to go, and it's wasting precious small group time. So pick a good place for your small group to meet. Make sure that it's private enough for the needs of your small group, but obviously not so secluded that nobody knows where you are and nobody can see you. But this time is going to be spent going over ICC, but also it's going to be a time for you guys to pray together, to let that worship be absorbed in. So you want to make sure that that place that you choose is going to be a good place that's conducive for that. Your role during this time is to facilitate the discussion. And so they sat through an entire sermon just listening. So it's not really a time for you to like talk at them. It's not a time for them to sit and like listen more, but it's more a time for them to actively participate in that discussion with each other and to let that message get absorbed in. Let's move on to the things that you're going to do at your very first gathering. So this is your very first post-worship gathering after our very first worship service on night 1. It's going to be a little different than your other worship gatherings, post-worship gatherings, because nobody knows each other. Everyone's a stranger. So what are some things do you think that you guys can share from your experience that these counselors should include in their very first gathering with their small group? Like, what kinds of things should they do to get everyone together?
I think for me, it's important that the leader sets the tone to begin with. Mm-hmm. So like letting them know, like first and foremost, like, you know, with the confidentiality pact that is provided, and letting them know that everything in here, you know, even the purpose of small group, reminding them like this is a time for us to really get deep right away, for us to just know Jesus, for us to, you know, get deep with each other and know that everything here is a safe space for us to share. Mm-hmm. So even setting that tone for them to realize like this is not, like, you know, setting a tone of trust for them to realize like, you know, that no one here is going to, you know, judge me. This is a time for me to, you know, be honest and open. So for the leader to set that tone to begin with, I think that really does help for the first gathering.
Yeah, and it's really important to go over that thoroughly the first meeting, that confidentiality pact, and then every meeting after that to kind of like open with a reminder of that. But that first meeting is where you're really gonna go into that really deeply.
Yeah, I think definitely laying those things out from the beginning can set the expectations that the small group leader is looking for. Mm-hmm. And I think communicating that clearly at the beginning is going to be important. And then, like you said, being able to remind them like, hey, this is what the small group is about. And our goal is to really care for them and to reach for them. And I think that definitely needs to happen over and over, and because it might take like several reminders for them to finally get it. So, but at least in the beginning, laying that out. But also like one thing that that has helped me is also kind of just telling them about myself to the group, so they can have an idea of who they're talking to, where I'm coming from, and I'm not just some person here. And also kind of sharing my heart, like what led me to come to this retreat. Mm-hmm. I think sharing that can help them understand, you know, you personally. Yeah. So I would really encourage the small group leaders to, you know, talk about themselves for a bit. You know, you don't want to dominate, but give them something so they can know like what you're about and where you're coming from.
Yeah, so, I think that's a definitely good way of opening up that, you know, that sharing time, and then maybe even go around and have everyone, introduce themselves and then share maybe their expectations for the retreat. It's always nice to kind of open with that the first meeting, and then at the very end to kind of like, go around the same circle and do the kind of like what they're doing, what they're taking away. So that's a nice way to kind of do that full circle. Another thing that you want to make sure you do is to go over the ICICC sharing time, because a lot of the kids are going to be used to the old ICC sharing way, and so which means you have to be confident in what ICC is, because you're going to be explaining it to them. I know it's really confusing, so if you need to rewatch our ICC video to familiarize yourself, and then because you have to be able to explain how that works to the kids, and also make sure that the kids know that this is your meeting space from now on, and then go with them in their schedules. This is the time that we're going to meet at this place, so that they know, oh, I'm supposed to come here at this time, so they know in their schedules, like, oh, this is what our post-worship gathering means. So lastly, we're going to go over the counselors wrap-up gathering. So this is after everybody is done with their small groups, and all the campers are going to be now moving toward their cabins. They're going to be transitioning for sleep time and sleep prep. And now the counselors, we're going to hang back and we're going to meet probably in the worship hall, I'm guessing, just like to circle around and kind of share over what happened through the night. This will also be a time for you to share some of your struggles that you're going through with your small group, and also some of your praise reports that you want to share with each other. It's going to be a way for us to kind of like wrap up the day and also to go over the next day's schedule, so that we're all on the same page. This is also a really good time that if you were in your small group and you were having a discussion and there was a question that maybe you couldn't answer, or something that someone struggled with, this is a good opportunity for you to kind of like, bring that up at your small group. Say, I don't know the answer to that question, but don't worry, I'll find out the answer and I'll get back to you at our next meeting. This is a good time for you to bring that up, and then we as a group can kind of like solve it together, so you don't feel like you have to have all the answers like on your own. In your guys' experience, what do you think is so beneficial and so essential for this counselors wrap-up gathering, for all the counselors at the end of the night, right before they go to sleep, to kind of get together, to talk about the day, to pray? What do you guys think about?
Like, one of the things that I realized that was really helpful is, as people are sharing their experience as small group leaders, I think there are certain struggles that are pretty consistent between each group. And I really encourage, sometimes the small group leaders kind of really keep that to themselves and try to resolve it on their own.
Yeah.
But I think sharing it is helpful, because there might be someone else, another small group leader who might have the same struggles. And I think talking it out and having that commonality can be supporting, can be a great support system. And I think that the small group leaders can also realize that even though you are the caregiver, that they have opportunities to care for one another as well. And I think it comes about during that time of sharing in this, what is this called? Counselors wrap-up gathering. I don't know what it's called. And I really, so like for me, I really want to encourage the leaders to, just be, just be open. Even this is their small group in a way. And I really want to encourage them that it's really beneficial to say something, and in knowing that we can pray for one another and we can support one another throughout the retreat. So yeah.
I totally agree with that, because when I was a retreat counselor, I think this is one of the very few times where I'm like, I really look forward to, because it's so easy to realize, sometimes to think that during small groups or during other times that you're like on your own, because you're doing all these things. But when you're coming together with other counselors, hearing their struggles and relating to the struggles, and you sharing your struggles and being open about it and receiving support, it makes you realize, like, you're not alone, that you are a team, that you are part of this community, and this community cares for you, and they're praying for you and supporting you. They have your back. So it's having such support, it brings such strength to look forward to the next day. Like, it's going to be another hard day, and a lot of things are going to happen, and maybe my small group's not doing so great, but with such support behind me and with me, reminding me that God is with me too. Like it gives you motivation to just move on forward. So I think this wrap-up gathering is such a essential time for all counselors. They shouldn't miss it. They shouldn't think that it's a waste of time. Definitely, this is something that will motivate them, encourage them, challenge them to be the greatest counselor they can be for their kids.
Yeah. I definitely encourage all of you to come to these counselor wrap-up gatherings with all of your questions, and don't shy away from asking for help. Like, I really am here to help you, and we really are here to help each other. So even if you need to, pull me aside like after to share like a struggle that you're going through with your small group, like I'm always here available for you. I could go into your small group with you for a session and kind of like help you navigate. I really want you to not feel shy about sharing your struggles and your needs, because we're here to kind of like work together as a team and to really help you along and to really be, like Pastor Julie said, the most successful small group leader you could be. Okay, so that's the end of our G for gatherings. Let's move on to the next letter in our acronym E for expectations. So now we're going into the last letter of our bridge acronym, E for expectation. So there are some expectations for your small group that you're going to have going into it. The expectation that you want to set, obviously, is that everyone's respectful and mindful of each other and respectful to you. But you want to set that tone, that very first meeting, with the pact and confidentiality, and let the kids know that what happens in small group stays in small group. You want to make sure that everyone is free to share without that fear of it being repeated or turned into gossip or turned into news later on. Like you want to make sure that the kids are all on the same page, that we're all here for the purpose of supporting each other, encouraging each other, and edifying God through our small group, our sharing time. So there are some sensitive exclusions, and I think, Pastor Daniel, you talked about that in a previous episode. Do you want to touch back on that again?
I think that definitely, if you've been watching this video series and if you have forgotten, I think it will be definitely good to go back and watch it again, just to be able to be familiar and be ready to handle situations and not to be surprised by them at all. Because there is a high possibility as the students are sharing that more and more secrets or difficult things are going to come out, and things like suicide, bullying, harming themselves. If you hear any of these things, then please, you have to report it to the pastor. So find a very discreet, a very subtle way to get that information across. But be mindful of that the possibility of a small group leader trying to have this kind of hero complex could be there because of this pact agreement. But please don't feel burdened like you have to go out and figure out all these difficult crisis situations. But be very sensitive to the campers, but also realize that as more sensitive information comes out, let the pastor know. But if you are really confused about what to do and it isn't as extreme as some of the examples I just spoke about, then definitely talk to Noel, or even talk to your own pastor or someone, so that you are at least in dialogue if you're unsure with what's happening with some of the students. So yeah, those are the recommendations that I would make.
Yeah. On a little bit of a side note, I wouldn't recommend telling your kids, by the way, that if you share anything like suicide, harming yourself, or anything, I am required to report it. Don't reveal that kind of aspect to your small group, because then if they are having those thoughts and they don't want anyone to know about it, then they're not going to be inclined to share it with you. But keep that in your mind as you're doing your small group time, sharing time, and then like Pastor Daniel said, very discreetly approach the child about it and let them know that you're going to have to report. Other expectations are the expectations that we have of our counselors. So you have those expectations of your students starting from your first small group meeting day one. But just as a retreat as a whole, all of us, we have expectations for you. Every counselor should have before coming to retreat, there should be some kind of spiritual prep going on to ready themselves for the retreat. Can you talk a little bit about that and share what that really means?
Yeah, I think that if you are having this desire to be a small group leader, of course we're not expecting people to be these model Christians, these these high class Christians who have like such strong faith, but there needs to be the spiritual preparation. There needs to be prayer, reading God's word, involvement in the church. I think everything is a given, but I think that this expectation needs to be explained about how you need to prepare. If you're gonna try to serve these kids and you're gonna try to speak into their lives and also kind of hear and give counsel, you yourself should have this kind of kind of built up. So it's not. I'm not. I think this expectation not asking people to do anything crazy like go on a personal retreat and just dedicate weeks on fasting and prayer. I mean, if you want to, please do that. But definitely there needs to be your own personal time with the Lord and seeking what God has to say even for your own life. So this I highly recommend people to be spending time with God as much as they can, so that as they're able to serve in the retreat, hopefully it will continue. It's not just something you do for the retreat, but it's a lifestyle of building certain habits of being sensitive to what God has to say in your life. That I encourage, and I think all of us here really support this preparation.
Yeah, I think just minimum that we require you to do for spiritual prep is just be in the Word, continue to pray, and attend your weekly Sunday services at your home church. So I think that's just like that at least the minimum you could do to kind of like spiritually prep yourself for the retreat. And if you can do more, by all means. What about like the personal space and boundaries of our counselors and how they're supposed to be carrying themselves, like the kind of attitude that they should come into the campus with? Like what kinds of things would you have to say about that?
Yeah, like counselors, we expect them to abide to the same rules as the campers. I think we need to get rid of this mentality that as a leader, we're entitled to some special treatment, or we're entitled to be excluded from certain rules. If you see Christ, he served in a humble way. He didn't get any special treatment. He literally became flesh. That's like the most humbling way he can serve. And so having that kind of attitude, the humbling attitude, we need to have that as a leader as well. So, personal space and boundaries, we can't think that, as a leader, I could, spend alone time with the other gender because, I'm more mature or much older. No, that's not biblical, that's not gospel-centered. So, as counselors, as leaders, we need to expect ourselves to have clear boundaries. So let's not isolate ourselves with the other gender, not form cliques within the small, like within other groups, and just even if another camper is coming, when the other gender wants to talk to you in private in the woods or whatever, we're not going, We're not gonna be thinking, I'm entitled to have this kind of exceptions. No, we're not. We have to make that clear. So personal space and boundaries are very important for campers, and if anything, especially for leaders.
Yeah, and I get it. Like most of you counselors have been away at college, and so some of these people that you're coming with to serve with, you haven't seen in a very long time. You might have friends from previous retreats that you're meeting for the first time in a year, and you want to have that social time. But save it for our post-retreat, our wrap-up gathering. Save it for when we're not at retreat. And during retreat, as long as you are at the retreat, your feet are on the campgrounds, and you're a counselor, that should be your mindset. You should be in like work mode, right? Yeah. And lastly, I just want to encourage everyone and remind you to be that bridge. Remember our acronym, BRIDGE. Lead with boldness, Remember your roles. Facilitate ICC. Be diligent in everything that you do. And make the most of every gathering. And expect God to do big things at this retreat. I think if you just be that bridge throughout the entire thing, you remember that acronym and you remember that attitude and that mindset of being a bridge throughout this retreat, you're really going to have a great retreat experience. Your kids are going to be so blessed because you came to serve. And I'm just really looking forward to working with all of you and seeing that kind of come forward at this retreat. Thanks for watching all 4 episodes. Feel free to go back and review and make sure you look through your manuals and study up. And I can't wait to meet you at our training day. Bye.